My name is Renata. They say that time heals all wounds, but some scars only grow deeper as the years pass. My story isn't just about a family dispute. It's about the moment I realized that I had spent decades buying an affection that was never truly mine. For 35 years, I was a mother first and a person second. When my husband, Robert, passed away, our son Max was only 5. I worked double shifts, sometimes as a waitress, sometimes cleaning offices, just to ensure Max never felt the void his father left behind. My retirement savings, my inheritance, every penny I earned it was all for him. When Max met Lena, I welcomed her with open arms. I thought I was gaining a daughter. Instead, I was inviting a parasite into our lives. For 3 years, I paid their $800 monthly rent. I bought their furniture, filled their refrigerator, and even paid for Lena's medical bills. Max would always say, "Mom, it's just for a few months until the promotion kicks in," and I, blinded by a mother's hope, kept giving. The turning point came on a Tuesday afternoon. I called Max to ask about the wedding preparations. I had already bought a beautiful pale pink dress, thinking of the photos we'd take. But it was Lena who answered the phone. Her voice was cold, stripped of the fake sweetness she usually wore. "Oh, Renata," she said with a chilling calmness, "we actually got married yesterday." It was a very private thing. We only invited special people. The word special people hit me like a physical blow. I had financed their life, their rings, and even Lena's wedding dress, yet I wasn't special enough to stand in the back of a courtroom to watch my only son say his vows. When I checked social media later, I saw photos of Lena's entire family toasting with champagne bought with the $1,000 gift I had sent them the week before. That night, I didn't cry. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table and did the math. In 3 years, I had given them over $33,000. I looked at the pale pink dress hanging in my closet and realized it was a shroud for the woman I used to be. I opened my laptop and, with one click, canceled the automatic rent transfers. If I wasn't special, my money didn't need to be either. Exactly 7 days later, the special status was forgotten. Lena called me, her voice trembling with a rehearsed desperation. "Renata, the rent is overdue. The landlord is at the door. You forgot the transfer." I took a slow sip of my tea. "I didn't forget, Lena," I replied. "I've just decided to only help special people from now on. And since I'm not one of them, I'm sure you'll find a way." The silence on the other end was deafening, but they didn't stop there. Within days, Max and Lena arrived at my house, not to apologize, but with a lawyer named Mr. Fisher. They tried to claim that my sudden change in behavior was a sign of mental decline. They wanted to declare me incompetent so they could take legal guardianship over my finances. My own son sat in my living room and watched a stranger suggest I was losing my mind, all because I stopped paying his bills. But they underestimated me. I wasn't just a mother. I was a woman who had survived loss and decades of hard work. I hired my own attorney, Mr. Weber, and underwent a full psychiatric evaluation. The results were flawless. When we finally stood in court, Max couldn't even look me in the eye. Lena tried to play the role of the grieving daughter-in-law, crying about how confused I had become. But Mr. Weber presented the bank statements. He showed the $33,000. He showed the social media posts from the wedding. He asked Max a simple question. Does a 35-year-old man need his mother's pension to survive, or does he just want it? The judge didn't take long to decide. He dismissed the case, calling it an attempt at elder financial abuse. He looked at Max and Lena and told them they should be ashamed. After the trial, Max tried to approach me in the hallway. "Mom, we can fix this," he whispered. "You're going to be alone. Who will take care of you?" I really looked at him and realized the boy I loved was gone, replaced by a man I didn't respect. "Max," I said, "I have been alone for a long time." The only difference is that now, I'm finally enjoying the company. I sold the big house filled with ungrateful memories and moved into a beautiful apartment by the city center. I started painting again, traveling, and spending time with people who valued me for my conversation, not my checkbook. Max and Lena had to move into a tiny studio, and for the first time in her life, Lena had to take a job at a department store. They learned the hard way that a mother's love is a gift, not a debt, and as for me, I finally learned that the most special person in my life was the one I had ignored for far too long, myself. The days following my decision to cancel the transfers were the quietest and most terrifying of my life. Every time a car drove past my house, my heart would leap into my throat. I knew Max and Lena wouldn't just go away. People like Lena don't handle the word no very well, especially when that no comes with a price tag of $800 a month. I spent those days preparing. I met with my lawyer, Mr. Weber, and we began the tedious process of documenting every cent I had ever given them. It was a painful walk down memory lane. I saw the $1,200 for their emergency car repair that turned out to be a down payment on a luxury vacation they never invited me on. I saw the $500 for Sarah's dental work that suspiciously coincided with her getting new designer handbags. Each line on the bank statement was a reminder of my own blindness. Renata, Mr. Weber said, looking over the mountain of receipts, you weren't just a mother. You were a venture capitalist for a business that never intended to pay you back, but the real storm broke on a Thursday. I was in my garden, finally planting the hydrangeas I had wanted for years but could never afford because I was too busy paying for Max's lifestyle. Suddenly, a sleek black car pulled into my driveway. A man in a sharp gray suit stepped out, carrying a manila envelope. Renata Richter, he asked, his voice devoid of emotion. Yes, I replied, wiping the soil from my hands. You've been served. He handed me the envelope and drove away. I sat on my porch steps, my heart pounding, and opened it. My breath hitched. It wasn't a thank you note or an apology. It was a formal petition for emergency legal guardianship and conservatorship. My own son, the boy I had cradled through fevers and heartbreaks, was suing me. The petition claimed I was suffering from age-related cognitive decline and irrational financial paranoia. It argued that I was no longer capable of managing my own assets and that for my protection, Max should be granted full control over my bank accounts, my house, and my investments. I felt a coldness settle over me that I had never felt before. It wasn't sadness. It was a sharp, crystalline rage. They didn't want to fix our relationship. They wanted to bury me alive in a legal cage so they could keep the ATM running. 2 hours later, Max and Lena burst into my house. They didn't knock. They used the spare key. Mom, we need to talk, Max shouted. He looked agitated, his eyes darting around the room. Lena stood behind him, her face a mask of fake concern. I think the court papers do the talking for you, Max, I said, standing in the middle of my kitchen, as still as a statue. Renata, honey, Lena said, stepping forward with that poisoned sweetness. We're just worried. You've changed. Canceling the rent, blocking our calls. It's not like you. The doctor says that at your age, sudden personality shifts are a huge red flag for dementia. We're doing this because we love you. You love my house insurance, Lena. I snapped. And you love the fact that Robert left me enough to keep you in silk dresses for the next 10 years. Don't you dare speak to me about love. Max looked at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Mom, please, just sign the voluntary power of attorney. We can drop the court case. We just want to make sure you're safe. I am safe, Max. I am safer than I've been in years because I finally see exactly who is standing in my living room. I pointed to the door. Get out and leave the key. We aren't leaving until you listen, Max yelled, his face turning red. You're being crazy. You're ruining everything. If I'm so crazy, Max, then call the police. Tell them your demented mother wants you off her property. I picked up my phone. Because if you aren't gone in 10 seconds, I'm calling them myself. They left, screaming insults as they went. Lena's last words were, "We'll see how tough you are when the judge takes your checkbook away." The next week was a blur of medical exams. Mr. Weber insisted on it. "We need to hit them with a mountain of proof," he said. I went to the state's top neurologist. I sat through hours of memory tests, cognitive puzzles, and psychiatric interviews. It was humiliating being forced to prove I was sane just because I chose to stop being a doormat. But while I was at the doctor's, I had my own secret weapon working. I had hired a private investigator named Elias. I told him, find out about Lena, find out where she came from. Elias called me on the night before our first court hearing. "Renata, you were right to trust your gut," he said. Lena Schuster didn't just appear out of thin air. Before she moved here and met Max, she lived in Arizona. She was a companion to an 85-year-old billionaire. When he died, his family sued her because she had convinced him to leave her 3 of his properties. She's a professional, Renata. She finds vulnerable families and bleeds them dry. I sat in the dark, the glow of the phone illuminating the tears on my face. My son wasn't just a villain, he was a pawn. He was being played by a woman who saw my husband's hard-earned legacy as her next jackpot. The morning of the hearing arrived. The courtroom was cold and smelled of floor wax. I sat at the defense table with Mr. Weber. Across the aisle sat Max and Lena with a lawyer who looked like he cost more than their overdue rent. Lena looked at me and mouthed the words, "It's over." Their lawyer stood up. "Your Honor, my clients are heartbroken. Mrs. Richter has a history of extreme generosity, but suddenly she has become hostile and paranoid. She is isolating herself and making irrational financial decisions that put her own future at risk. We ask for a temporary injunction to freeze her accounts until a full competency hearing can be held." The judge, a stern woman with gray hair, looked at me. "Mrs. Richter, do you have a response?" I stood up. My legs felt like lead, but my voice was like iron. "Your Honor, my son is right about one thing. I have been irrational. I was irrational to pay the rent of 2 able-bodied adults for 3 years. I was irrational to let them treat me like a stranger while I filled their cupboards. But I am not demented. I am simply awake." Mr. Weber stood up and placed a heavy file on the judge's desk. "Your Honor, we would like to submit the results of 3 independent neurological exams, all confirming my client is in the top 5th percentile for cognitive function for her age." And, quote, he paused, looking directly at Lena. "We would like to submit evidence regarding the petitioner's wife and her history of predatory financial behavior in the state of Arizona." The silence in the room was so thick you could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Lena's face went from pale to ghostly white. Max looked at her, his mouth hanging open in confusion. "Predatory behavior?" the judge asked, leaning forward. "Yes, Your Honor," Mr. Weber continued. "It seems this isn't the first time Mrs. Lena Richter has tried to protect the assets of an older person." The judge looked at the papers, then at Lena, then at me. "This hearing is adjourned for 2 hours," she barked. "I want all parties in my chambers, now." As we walked out of the courtroom, Max grabbed my arm. "Mom, what is he talking about? Arizona? What is this?" I looked at my son, the boy I had loved so much I almost let him destroy me. I pulled my arm away. "Ask your special wife, Max. I'm sure she has a very special explanation for you." I walked away, leaving them in the hallway. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a queen defending her kingdom. The war wasn't over, but the tide had turned. The silence inside Judge Miller's chambers was suffocating. I sat on one side of the mahogany table, my hands folded neatly in my lap. Opposite me sat Max and Lena. Max looked like a man who hadn't slept in weeks, but Lena was different. Her eyes were darting around the room, her foot tapping a nervous rhythm against the floor. She no longer looked like the confident bride who had told me I wasn't special. She looked like a cornered animal. Judge Miller didn't waste any time. He slammed a thick file, the one my investigator, Elias, had prepared onto the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Mrs. Lena Richter, the judge began, his voice dropping to a dangerous level of calm. I have a report here from the state of Arizona. It details a civil suit from 4 years ago involving the estate of an 85-year-old man. Would you like to explain why your name is listed as the primary defendant in a case of undue influence and financial exploitation? Lena's face went from pale to a ghostly, translucent white. She stammered, "Your Honor." That was a misunderstanding. I was just his caretaker. His children were greedy and didn't like that he appreciated my company. But my lawyer, Mr. Weber, wasn't about to let her slide. A misunderstanding? Lena, you isolated that man from his family for 18 months. You convinced him to change his will 3 weeks before he died. You used the exact same mental incompetence tactic against his children that you are trying to use against Renata today. Max turned his head slowly to look at his wife. It was the look of a man watching his world crumble. Lena, Arizona, you told me you lived in Oregon your whole life. You told me you were an orphan with no history. Max, baby, they're lying. Lena grabbed his arm, her voice rising in a desperate pitch. Your mother is paying them to say these things. She wants to destroy us because she's jealous of our happiness. Max pulled his arm away. For the first time in 3 years, I saw my son not the puppet Lena had made him, but my son look at the truth. Judge Miller leaned forward. Mrs. Richter, he said, looking at me with a soft respect. The neurological reports we received this morning are flawless. You are in perfect health. To suggest otherwise is not only an insult to this court, but it is a calculated attempt at a crime. He then turned back to Max and Lena. I am dismissing this petition for guardianship immediately. Furthermore, I am referring this file to the district attorney's office for an investigation into elder financial abuse. And as for the special people you mentioned, the judge paused, looking at Lena with pure disgust. I suggest you find a very special lawyer, because you're going to need one. We walked out of the courtroom into the bright afternoon sun. Lena didn't wait. She hissed something to Max and ran toward the parking lot, her heels clicking aggressively on the pavement. Max stood there, frozen. He finally looked at me. Mom, he whispered, his voice cracking. I didn't know. I thought she loved me. I thought we were doing the right thing for your health. I adjusted my sunglasses. I wanted to reach out, to tell him it was okay, but I remembered the coldness in his voice when he called me confused. I remembered the locks they tried to put on my life. Max, I said, my voice steady. You didn't want what was best for my health. You wanted what was best for your comfort. You traded your mother's dignity for a rent-free life. Lena didn't trick you into being greedy. She just gave your greed a reason to come out. Mom, please, that we have nowhere to go. Lena spent the wedding gift money on a secret account. We're being evicted tomorrow. I looked at my only son. Then I suggest you start packing, Max, because as of this moment, my bank is closed. My house is locked, and the special treatment is over. I walked to my car, leaving him standing in the shadow of the courthouse. I had won the legal war, but the biggest revelation, the one that would truly shatter Max's world, was still waiting in the folder Elias had given me. After the court hearing, the air in my home felt different. The emergency was over, but the damage was done. I spent the next few days changing every lock on every door and window. I also sat down with Elias, the private investigator, for one last briefing. He handed me a final set of documents that were the final nails in the coffin of my relationship with Max and Lena. Renata, Elias said, his face grim. I tracked the $10,000 you gave them as a wedding gift. It never went to a florist or a caterer. Lena moved it into an offshore digital account the very next day. She wasn't just planning to live off you. She was building an exit fund. She was going to wait until the guardianship was approved, drain your retirement, and disappear, leaving Max to deal with the legal fallout. The cruelty of it was breathtaking. She didn't just want my money. She wanted to destroy my son in the process. 2 days later, Max showed up at my door. He didn't have his key anymore. He had to ring the bell like a stranger. When I opened it, he looked broken. His eyes were bloodshot, and his clothes were wrinkled. "She's gone, Mom," he sobbed, leaning against the doorframe. Lena left. She took the last of the cash in our joint account. She even took the furniture you bought us. The landlord changed the locks this morning because the rent is 2 weeks overdue. I have nothing. I'm staying in my car. I looked at him, my only child, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to pull him inside and fix everything. I felt a profound sense of detachment. "I know she's gone, Max," I said calmly, "and I know she took the money. I also know she sold the car I co-signed for and lied to you about it being repossessed." Max stared at me, his mouth agape. How do you know all that?" "Because while you were busy trying to prove I was incompetent, I was busy being a mother and protecting what was left of our dignity," I replied. "Mom, please," he begged, tears streaming down his face. "Just 1 month. Just let me sleep on the sofa until I find a job. I have nowhere else to go. You're my mother. You're supposed to help me." I took a deep breath. "Max, I helped you for 35 years. I helped you so much that you forgot how to be a man. I helped you until you thought it was okay to sue me for my own life. If I help you now, I'm just helping you stay weak. You need to find a shelter or a friend or a job, but you cannot find a home here." I closed the door. It was the hardest thing I have ever done, but as the latch clicked, I felt a surge of liberation. I wasn't being cruel. I was being honest. The fallout was swift. Because of the evidence my lawyer submitted to the district attorney, a warrant was issued for Lena. She was caught 2 weeks later in a casino in Nevada, trying to use a credit card she had opened in my name. She is currently serving a 5-year sentence for grand larceny and elder exploitation. Max is now working a grueling job at a shipping yard and living in a tiny, 1-room studio. He calls me every Sunday. He doesn't ask for money anymore. He knows better. He asks for advice. He asks for recipes. He is slowly, painfully learning what it means to be an adult. As for me, I didn't stay in that house. It held too many shadows of a woman who gave too much. I sold it for a handsome profit and bought a penthouse apartment in the city with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the park. I spent a month in Paris, another in Tokyo. I joined a hiking club and started taking Italian cooking classes. I wear the pale pink dress I bought for the wedding to the theater and the opera. Every time I look in the mirror, I don't see a confused old woman. I see Renata, a woman who survived the betrayal of her own blood and came out stronger, wealthier, and finally, truly special. My name is Renata. I am 71 years old, and my life has just begun.